itself tonight. We're going to talk about the program, give an overview. We're also going to touch on the application process step by step. And like Malin mentioned, we're going to save questions for the end. Again, you can ask them at any point throughout in the chat, but we'll save the answers for the end. Now, Ignition Fund, what is it? First and foremost, we like to tell people this is a competitive process, which is very different from our other programs. You're really fighting for the money, for lack of a better word. And what type of money? We're talking $25,000 per recipient. We typically do 3 to 5 winners each round. Another thing to note with the Ignition Fund that's different from our other innovation PEI programs, if some of you are familiar, is there's no matching requirement and there's no 50% support. This is 100% a grant. You don't have to pay for any portion of the project. This is just $25,000 for you to pursue your proposal and your pitch. A couple of examples of how the funds have been used in the past, and this is not exhaustive. We can obviously talk to other ideas as well, but marketing and sales, if you're actually doing the advertising, creating the branding, placing the advertising. If you're developing the product or service, whether that requires hiring a developer, for example, if it's an IT project, buying equipment, for example, if you're producing a product, if you're looking to hire a contractor or a consultant to come in to help with the development, if you have intellectual property concerns and looking to do some registrations to protect some of your IP, these are all things we've covered in the past. And again, we've covered other things as well, but these are just some ideas to let you start to think about them. Now we have 4 key criteria when it comes to eligibility, and we really put the onus on you as the applicant to screen yourself in or out to determine if you are the right fit. The first one is that the project itself and the business is committed to being on Prince Edward Island and operating on Prince Edward Island. The second is that the product or service itself is innovative, unique, novel relative to the rest of the marketplace. The third is that the product or service must have export potential. And what we mean by that, first of all, is you don't need to be exporting on day one. It could be part of the roadmap as you scale up. And what do we mean by exporting? We mean that you have customers beyond the jurisdiction of Prince Edward Island. So for example, we get the question a lot if you're an IT business and you're obviously not exporting a physical good. If you have clients in Toronto or the US or further abroad, that in those contexts is considering exporting. And finally, the product or service must be scalable, and this really speaks to the size of the market that you're going after. We want to see that this is a large opportunity that can grow and that you're not limited to grow the business by the size of the market itself. Now, the program layout, it has 2 distinct phases. And I say distinct because the first one is a written component and the second is a pitch. For the written component, we're looking for maximum 13 pages, a report outlining the project or proposal that you're looking to receive funding for, at which point you submit that to us. Innovation PEI reviews it. We select 10 to 12 finalists typically to move on to the second phase as a finalist. And at that point, you will actually pitch the proposal in front of a panel similar to a Dragon's Den or a Shark Tank, a 15-minute pitch with 10 minutes for Q&A. And the winners of the 25,000 are picked by that judging panel. So again, to really understand it, the first phase is to just get into the ball game. You want to write the most competitive and compelling report that you can to hopefully be selected as a finalist. And then in phase 2, you're solely focusing on the pitch. And we actually have a pitching coach or a pitch coach as well that comes in to help you prepare and have confidence in that pitch, which I'll touch about a little bit further. Now, the timeline itself, the program is already live, but really the submission deadline is fast approaching, May 13th at 1 p.m. I cannot stress this enough. If you have a written copy of the application handy. Note this date down. We get, without fail, every year people submitting after the deadline, and unfortunately, no extenuating circumstances can be accepted. You unfortunately will not be able to be considered if you submit after 1 p.m. on Monday, May 13th. At which point Innovation PEI and our staff takes a review, a preliminary review of every single application. We score those and we move them to the finalists. And everybody who applies will be notified whether or not they're moving on as a finalist or not by email on May 31st. Next, like I mentioned, we have the pitch sessions themselves in front of the judges. This is on June 20th and 21st, which is a Thursday and Friday. Typically, the sessions are all day long, but again, your pitch itself is only 25 minutes. I will note before the pitch session, like I said, before there is a session for coaching to provide some guidance, some advice, and to increase your confidence before you pitch. Because again, the first phase being a written proposal and the second being an oral pitch are very different ways to present information. So we want to make sure all the finalists feel confident and prepared to actually deliver a successful pitch. And finally, the results, whether or not you're successful in earning that $25,000, will be released in July 2024, again, via email. And we're running through it again. Now, I like to include this slide to give everybody an idea of how competitive this program is, because I mentioned that at the outset. Here are the numbers of applicants for the past 3 rounds and the number of projects that we funded. So in each case, you had a better than 10% chance of actually being successful. And when we look at other pitch contests in PEI or nationally or globally, the odds at which you can win are much slimmer than this. So we really like to emphasize this point that if you create a very compelling business case and proposal, the odds that you can be successful are in your favor. And we really want to encourage you all to apply if you think you're a great fit. I'm also just going to walk through 4 past recipients as almost inspiration for you to think about whether your project and your idea might be the right fit for what we're looking for in the Ignition Fund. So first, Sophistifish. Sophistifish is a software and hardware company in combination serving the commercial lobster fishery, providing tracking and data around the catch to optimize their production. Au Naturel Solutions is a really interesting one. It's a patented breast prosthesis, which is all natural. And the existing market before did not have an all natural option for folks who had skin conditions or sensitivities. So they came in, developed a new product, patented and commercialized it, and met that market need. Salty Mountain Clothing Company, they actually just won a year ago today in the spring, and they're a clothing brand creating workwear specific to the female marketplace because the founding team, as a journey carpenter themselves, had encountered that much of the workwear in the marketplace today did not address many of the needs specific to women, so they created an entire line addressing those needs. And finally, Weeby Condiment Company, which produced a soy sauce on Prince Edward Island using Prince Edward Island ingredients, but also leveraging traditional fermentation techniques to actually brew the soy sauce. So again, 4 very distinct projects. So again, it shows that we can support a diversity of ideas, but we like to see the ideas are very sophisticated as well. Now, I mentioned the 4 eligibility criteria, but what are you actually reviewed against when myself or the rest of the Innovation PEI team actually takes a look at your application? Well, it comes down to 4 things, which again are related to the criteria. The first of which we want to understand the proposed product or service. Does it actually address a problem? We want to see that fairly laid out. Second, we want to see the experience demonstrated by the founding team, the management, the key employees. Basically, we want to understand why you are the right person to address the problem that you mentioned in number one. Number three, we want to understand the market opportunity. Is business trending in the right direction? Is the industry growing? And finally, business growth speaks to, again, the scale of the market. And those two really work hand in hand. We're looking for a growing marketplace and an already large marketplace to ensure that there's sufficient demand for you to grow. Now, that was a high-level overview of the Ignition Fund program itself. And at this point, we're going to take a look at the application guide step by step. We're going to go into a little bit more depth. So if you already have it pulled up in another tab or you have a printed copy of the written application guide, I encourage you to pull that up as I go through here. So the first section is simple. Contact info. We just need to be able to reach you if you're successful. So name, phone number, email address, things like this. Section 2, this is where we start to dive into the project, like I mentioned before. So in A, we want to talk about the product or service, maximum of 3 pages. We want to see an explanation of that product or service. We also want to see the problem, like I had mentioned, that you're attempting to solve with your product or service. We want to understand how it's innovative relative to the existing offerings in the market today. And finally, is that innovation sustainable? And what we mean by that is, are there maybe intellectual property concerns that would not allow the business to sustain itself for years to come, or maybe regulatory issues or technology improving where it would make your innovation no longer relevant to the marketplace. So again, we just want you to explain why this is a great product or service and why this idea has legs. Now, taking a look at section B, like I just mentioned a minute ago, we're looking for the founding team, the key employees, the management. We want to understand the skill sets that the founders and management team has, whether they have any applicable experience, whether that be in entrepreneurship and developing new businesses, or whether it be industry experience in the domain that you're targeting. We also want to see where you might not be as strong, where you maybe need to hire additional support, whether that be by outsourcing it through a contractor or a consultant, or hiring somebody in-house as a co-founder maybe, or CEO, etc. We also ask that you attach a current version of your resume as well. Again, just to build on this section to really understand why you in particular are the right person or right people to be going after the problem that you identified. Taking a look at C, we want to talk about the market itself. Number one, we want a bit of an analysis on the target market, the size of the market, where the industry is, where it exists in that industry. We also want to understand who your customers are, whether that be very specific or very broad. An understanding from end to end is great to see. In number 2, we want to understand, is the need that you identified, the problem, already being met by an incumbent firm or competitor? Then we want to see you identify those different competitors, where their advantages lie and where they maybe have disadvantages relative to you. Number 3, we want to understand how you're actually going to distribute this via your sales and marketing strategies, whether that be by growing naturally through organic TikTok videos, for example, or hiring a full-fledged sales team to hit the ground running and sell your product. We want to see that thought through and written out in the application. And number 4, we want to understand the revenue model. How are you actually going to monetize and make money, whether it be per unit, per hour, per service, subscription as a service, royalties, licensing. We want to understand what the actual model you plan to use is and some idea of the figures and why this actually is a viable idea. Coming into section D, we're going to talk about the statement of work. So this really speaks to what you're going to do with the money if you're successful. So number one, we want to see you outline the work that needs to be done over the next calendar year. Effectively, what this looks like is a timeline with a handful of milestones at different points. Maybe it be phases, however you want to organize it. We want to see this laid out, that you have a roadmap, that you know where you're going. Number two, we want to see a project budget. And again, we want to understand where you're going to use the funds that you would be receiving from the Ignition Fund. A question we get all the time is, well, do I need to get invoices or quotes to show how much these items cost? Or how would I ever be able to estimate these numbers? Really, we're looking for a high level estimate of the budgetary needs. It doesn't need to be so specific. We just want to see something that's based in reality and that's realistic. So in this case, whether that be 5,000 to equipment, 1,000 for a consultant, 2,000 for marketing, etc. And then on the other side of the budget, we want to see your funding sources. So in this case, you'd have 25,000 inflow of cash from the Ignition Fund. And then we want to know if you're receiving any other funding, whether you're investing personally, whether you're taking private investment from your network, venture capital, for example, or traditional lending from a bank, private lenders, etc. We want to have an idea of where you're planning to get the money. And to this point as well, some projects are $25,000 total, and the Ignition Fund can cover 100%. But some projects are $250,000, and 25,000 from the Ignition Fund supports a portion, but obviously you need to come up with those additional funds through other sources. So we just want to have an idea of that. Now, moving forward, again, building on the statement of work, and after you've done the budget, we then want to see you explain how the Ignition funds will actually be used to move your project forward and execute on the timeline and the milestones that you previously outlined. We also want to see a financial forecast included for the next 1, 2, and 3 years. The key advice I would have with this section is similar to the budget, where you don't need to be super specific. However, we do want to see you being conservative in nature, potentially using industry data if you can find anything that seems reasonable. But again, conservative is really key here, because with any business, risk is inherent. So showing the figures conservatively shows that you understand the risk that is associated with actually starting your business. And finally, we're the provincial government. We're giving you money. Our mandate is economic development on Prince Edward Island. So we need an explanation of how us supporting your project actually provides an economic benefit to PEI, whether that be through direct employment, hiring people and creating jobs, or through revenue growth, which would be taxed. Whatever that may be, we want to see an explanation on how it actually benefits PEI for us to support your project. Now, when it comes to submitting the application, again, I stressed that it's due at May 13th at 1 p.m. already. I emphasize that again. I cannot emphasize it enough. But when it comes to actually submitting your application, we want to see a report. There's no online submission form. All you do is go on Word or go on Google Docs. You create that report based on the application guide on our website, and you submit that via email at the ignitionfund@gov.pe.ca, whether that be in a Word format or a PDF format. You'll immediately get a confirmation email. If you don't, you can either email that same address again, saying you did not receive confirmation, or you can reach out to myself and we can work that out. But again, we want to see it in a PDF format or a Word format, emailed to ignitionfund@gov.pe.ca. before 1 p.m. on Monday, May 13th, in a week and a half. And that's everything right now. I know I ran through everything at a fairly high level, so I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. And if you have any specific questions to your idea and maybe you don't want it to be in a public forum, please email or call myself tomorrow or in the next week, and we can discuss in more depth. Thank you so much. And I can't tell if there are any questions. All I can see are the slides on my screen. So Madeline, maybe you can let me know.
Yeah, of course. I did notice, David, you have your hand